China holds trillions of dollars in American debt. China builds more ships, more steel, more solar panels, more electric cars than any other nation on Earth. It's the second largest economy on the planet. And yet, walk into a bank in Lagos, or Lima, or Dubai, and try to take out a loan in Chinese yuan. You probably can't. Here's the part that should really bother Beijing. Russia is one of China's closest partners, and even Russia, cut off from the West, still settles most of its trade in anything but the yuan whenever it can. So here's the question. If China is so big, why is its money still so small? After 30 years of trying, why can't China get the world to trust its currency the way it trusts the dollar? That's what we're figuring out today. This isn't really a story about money. It's a story about trust, about what happens when one country's currency becomes so deeply woven into the world's financial system that even its rivals can't escape it. The US dollar shows up in roughly 9 out of every 10 currency trades on Earth. It's the language the global economy speaks, even when the speakers don't like the country that issued it. China has poured extraordinary money and will into changing that. So why hasn't it worked? The real mystery isn't why is the dollar strong. It's why can't raw economic size buy you what the dollar has? If scale alone were enough, China would have already won. By the end of this video, you'll understand why a $100 bill is one of America's most successful exports, and why China may never outcompete it. Not because its economy is too small, because of a choice it made decades ago and refuses to undo. Let's start somewhere unexpected. A small hotel in New Hampshire, summer of 1944. World War II hadn't even ended, but delegates from 44 countries gathered at the Mount Washington Hotel to design the financial operating system for the post-war world. Sounds like a footnote, a boring meeting about exchange rates. But here's the strange part. What they decided still shapes your life today. Two plans were on the table. British economist John Maynard Keynes wanted a brand new neutral world currency called the Bancor. The Americans had a different idea. Let the dollar do the job. Backed by gold at $35 an ounce. Guess which plan won? America had just emerged from the war as the richest power on earth, holding most of the world's gold. So the dollar became the anchor. This wasn't really about economics. It was about who held the leverage in the room. Here's the surprising turn. The dollar didn't earn dominance through some natural law. It won it through a negotiation at one moment, which raises an uncomfortable question. If dominance was decided once, in one room, can it be decided again in another? Keep that question in your pocket. We're coming back to it. Fast forward to August 1971. A quiet Sunday evening. President Nixon goes on air and announces, almost casually, that America will no longer convert dollars into gold. The entire global monetary system rested on that one promise. Nixon just ended it unilaterally, without warning anyone. Furious allies called it the Nixon shock. Logically, a country that just broke its core financial promise to the planet should have watched its currency collapse. People should have fled the dollar. They didn't. Why not? The dollar was already so deeply embedded into global habit that breaking its gold backing didn't break its dominance. There was no alternative network deep enough to switch to overnight. Lesson 1. Once a currency becomes the world's default operating system, it can survive shocks that would destroy almost anything else. Inertia is its own kind of superpower. So if gold no longer backed the dollar, what did? In the years after, American officials struck quiet deals with Saudi Arabia and the rest of OPEC. Oil would be priced and sold in dollars. In exchange, America offered the Gulf states security guarantees. This became known as the petrodollar system. Oil is the one commodity nearly every country needs, constantly. If oil is priced in dollars, you need dollars, not because you trust American politics, but because that's the toll booth everyone has to drive through. Here's the wait a minute moment, though. Researchers who've actually traced the money argue the real flow of oil profits into U.S. assets is smaller than the popular myth suggests. Some call it closer to financial folklore than mechanism. So why does it still matter if it's partly myth? Because underneath it sits something true, something far harder for China to copy. Picture running a central bank in Indonesia or Brazil. You've just exported billions in goods and need somewhere safe to park that money. Somewhere you can pull it back out instantly without moving the market. For decades, the answer has been U.S. government debt. This is the real engine room of dollar dominance. The U.S. Treasury market is roughly $28 trillion deep, the largest, most liquid pool of safe assets on the planet. You can move enormous sums through it without barely a ripple. A reserve currency isn't about a flag or even an economy size. It's about whether the world's biggest investors can park money safely and get it back, even mid-crisis. China's bond market, despite being the third largest in the world, isn't close. And that's not a technical limitation, it's a political choice. Here's where the contradiction sits at the center of this whole story. China wants the yuan trusted internationally. China also refuses to let money move freely in and out of the country. You can't fully have both, and Beijing keeps choosing control. Right now, a Chinese citizen can convert only $50,000 a year without special approval. Go beyond that, and you need permission from the State Administration of Foreign Exchange, a government office that decides whether your money can leave. This is the load-bearing wall of China's whole economic model. Capital controls trap savings inside Chinese banks, which the state channels into building cities and factories at remarkable speed. But a reserve currency needs to move freely, in good times and bad. The yuan is a currency you can get into far more easily than you can get out of. In late 2025, when authorities discovered roughly $1 trillion in unauthorized money had slipped out of China in a single year, they didn't loosen the rules. They cracked down harder. $1 trillion trying to leave, and the response was a higher wall, not a wider door. China isn't failing to internationalize the yuan by accident. It's choosing not to, every time openness would threaten its grip at home. Let's put numbers on this. The dollar is involved in close to 90% of foreign exchange transactions worldwide and makes up nearly 60% of official reserves. The yuan's share of international usage, somewhere around 2 to 4%. China builds roughly a third of the world's manufactured goods. It's the second largest economy on Earth, and its currency's global footprint rounds to almost nothing next to the dollar's. Strange, if you assume bigger economy means bigger currency influence. It doesn't. Build all the factories you want. If the money they earn can't move freely, the world has no reason to hold it. China knows this gap exists. It's why, even while pushing the yuan abroad, Beijing still holds something like $3 trillion in U.S. reserves itself. It's still hedging in the very currency it's trying to dethrone. You've probably seen headlines about BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and others, supposedly building a new currency to challenge the dollar. Sounds like the obvious fix. If no single country can match the dollar alone, why not pool several into one shared currency? Here's the contradiction that kills it every time. A shared currency needs a shared central bank, which means every member gives up control of its own economy during a crisis. Look at the Eurozone during the Greek debt crisis. 19 countries with deep historical ties nearly tore the euro apart. Now imagine that with Russia, India, China, and Brazil. Economies with wildly different needs, and in China and India's case, real mutual suspicion. What's actually happening instead is smaller. Countries settling specific trades directly in local currencies, bypassing the dollar for that one deal. Real and growing. Nowhere near a new global reserve currency. Here's where this gets more interesting than a simple China is failing story. Because that's not quite accurate. China may not be building a dollar killer at all. It looks more like a bypass road running alongside the highway, not a replacement for it. The People's Bank of China has quietly built currency swap agreements with over 30 countries, roughly double a decade ago, deals letting central banks exchange currencies directly. No dollar required. Take Zambia, which mines copper that China buys constantly. Zambia is often short on dollars. China has plenty of yuan. Settling that trade directly in yuan is simply more convenient. The yuan isn't trying to become the new dollar. It's becoming a regional trade currency, especially useful for countries themselves short on dollars or wary of U.S. sanctions. Real progress, just not what beating the dollar requires. There's one more piece, and it might explain why China is trying so hard. In 2022, after Russia invaded Ukraine, Western governments froze hundreds of billions in Russian reserves almost overnight. Money Russia assumed was safe simply became frozen. Watching from Beijing, an uncomfortable thought follows. China holds trillions in U.S. assets. If relations with Washington ever soured that badly, could the same happen to China? That's the real engine behind the yuan's push abroad. Not prestige, insurance, a pipeline Washington can't freeze with a signature. But here's the bitter irony. The very capital controls protecting China's financial system are the same controls preventing the yuan from becoming trusted enough to actually serve as that insurance. China is building a lifeboat out of the same plank it refuses to remove from its own ship. To be fair, this isn't a one-sided story. There are real cracks in the dollar's armor. Its share of global reserves has slowly declined for 2 decades, from roughly 72% in the early 2000s to the high 50s today. Central banks really have been diversifying, buying more gold along the way. U.S. national debt, near $39 trillion, keeps climbing, and some economists worry endless borrowing eventually erodes confidence in any currency. Even the dollar's safe haven behavior has gotten stranger. Researchers have found it doesn't always rally during global stress the way it classically used to. So the honest answer isn't the dollar is invincible, it's genuine erosion at the margins, alongside near total dominance at the core. China isn't actually the first to attempt this. In the 1980s, Japan looked unstoppable, its companies buying up American landmarks, with economists debating whether the yen would overtake the dollar. It didn't. Japan's bubble burst in the early 90s, and growth stalled for decades. Then the euro got its turn in the 2000s. The Greek debt crisis ended that conversation fairly quickly, too. There's a strange rhythm here. Roughly every couple of decades, a new candidate looks ready to challenge the dollar. And every time, something about that candidate's own structure, not American interference, is what stops them. China may be the latest entry in a very old pattern. So, why can't China beat the dollar? There's no single dramatic reason. Several reinforcing ones stacked together. The dollar sits on the deepest, most liquid bond market on Earth, built over 2 centuries. It rides network effects so strong that even countries wary of America still need dollars, because everyone else does too. And it carries institutional trust, independent courts, enforceable contracts, a central bank that answers to no president, built over generations. China has built extraordinary industrial power, but it hasn't been willing to give up the one thing a reserve currency requires: letting money move freely, outside the government's control. China could open its capital account tomorrow. Doing so would mean surrendering exactly the control that built its economic miracle. Every time that trade-off has come up, Beijing has chosen control. Until that changes, the yuan keeps growing in specific corners of the world, in specific trades. It won't replace the dollar, not because China isn't powerful enough, but because the price of a true reserve currency is an openness China hasn't decided it can afford. Here's what makes this bigger than currencies and central banks. Every day, you make a version of this same trade-off. Keep tight control over something, your time, your money, your relationships, and you stay safe, but you limit how much others can rely on you. Open yourself up, And you build trust, but you accept real vulnerability. There's no universally right answer. China chose control and built something remarkable with it. Hundreds of millions lifted out of poverty, the most productive manufacturing base on Earth. That choice paid off enormously, but it also means China can't have the one thing that trade-off costs: a currency the world trusts the way it trusts the dollar. The dollar isn't dominant just because America is rich or powerful. It's dominant because, flaws and all, the world has decided, transaction after transaction, that it can be trusted to let your money go. That kind of trust is brutally slow to build. It doesn't yield to economic size or political ambition alone. It only yields to time, openness, and an uncomfortable willingness to give up control. Now we know China didn't lose the race for the world's reserve currency because its economy is too small. It hasn't won that race because it has never been willing to lose enough control to actually try.
Every question begins with a moment of wonder. Today, we explored one of them. The more we learn, the more we realize how much there is still to discover. So keep asking questions, keep exploring, keep wondering why. Because every great discovery starts with a simple question: why? I'm Willie, and I'll see you in the next Why?